Hello, hello. It's Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, we're going to be going over a song that's come out about a decade ago. This song, Pharrell Williams' Happy, when it first came out, an audio engineer friend of mine said to me, Justin, if you checked out this new song by Pharrell, it's really popular, it seems, but the mix just isn't very good. And I thought this was really interesting because my audio engineer friend told me that the low end, particularly on the kick, was boomy and muddy. The bass was indistinct and tubby. The hi-hats were gratingly, annoyingly loud. And what about those background vocals? They were louder than the lead vocal. And there's this organ that plays a central melodic part that's just buried in the mix. How was this mix that was so quote-unquote bad so successful? And in thinking about that, I came to the determination that that means that it wasn't a bad mix. And for me, what makes a mix great is whether or not that mix serves the song. And we're going to go in depth and in detail on this song and look exactly what makes this mix work, why it works. We'll bring open Pro Tools, we'll listen to it front to back, we'll kind of get through like little slices of it and really analyze what's going on. Because each one of those complaints that I made about this song, or that my engineer friend made about this song, is in a way correct. But I also believe that if we were to try to change and fix any of those things, the mix would be worse. And I think you'll understand exactly what I mean as we're going through it. There's also a whole bunch of great lessons buried in this track on things like arrangement, on things like mixing tricks that are really arrangement tricks, and arrangement tricks that are really mixing tricks. And we're also going to learn about some tricks that your ears can play on you. Because with me, this track played tricks on my ears, and we're going to talk about why. We'll listen to this through some filters too, so we can get a sense for how it sounds and how it translates to a variety of different sounding systems. This is something that works on earbuds and phones and laptop speakers, and it works on big, impressive speaker systems. So there's a lot to dig into here. Credit where credit's due first and foremost to Leslie Braithwaite. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Leslie, if you ever watch this and I'm saying it wrong, please let me know. I probably should have looked it up right before this. Leslie Braithwaite. He's known as being one of these guys who left analog mixing in the dust ages ago, has gone to in-the-box mixing, and hasn't looked back. But this mix, I think most of you listening to it wouldn't guess that it sounds super in the boxy. Like it sounds retro and old school in so many ways, while also sounding modern. And we'll look at why that is. But this is a song that, man, it's a decade old now, but it has probably been played at like 99.9% of weddings that have happened in the past decade. And that will probably happen for decades to come. I'm going to be trying to do these mix breakdowns more often, and I've been yammering for 3 minutes. We're gonna start listening to some music. We're gonna go really deep, and we're gonna hear a lot of tunes. So this will be the last of my opening remarks. But I've been wanting to do these mix breakdowns. We do something like this in the members only section. If you want to join, feel free. Randy just became a member here. Thanks for joining here in real time. And in those members only feedback sessions, we listen to your mixes in this way against some of your favorite releases. And we get to get that idea of what's separating your mixes from the best mixes out there. So if that sounds interesting, check out the membership options. If you just want to see more great videos like this one, remember to hit like and subscribe and the notifications bell and all that. But one of the things I want to start with is a whole series on songs that will probably be played at every single wedding for the next 30 or 40 years. The thing that I like about songs that are played at everyone's weddings is that these are songs where even if you're into metal, if you're into trap hip hop, if you're into hardcore punk, if you're into country, there are these songs that no matter what genres you're into, still get people out of their chairs, and people who like other genres begrudgingly like and will begrudgingly dance and move to. And this song, Happy by Pharrell, is absolutely one of them. All right, let's dive straight into it. Right before I play audio, quick shout out to our sponsors, Soundtoys, Lewitt Audio, Ultimate Support Stands, and our great courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, and Compression Breakthroughs. Check them out, more on that later. But let's get right into listening to this track, Happy by Pharrell Williams. And we'll start at a very fine place to start, the beginning. And I'm going to have stuff to say about the first several seconds here. Have a listen.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot
Now I'm going to stop it right here before we drop into the chorus, because there's going to be so much to talk about in the chorus. But right there, just in that beginning section, these opening bars, we're already interested in the song. I mean, there's no wasted time in this. There's a surprise even in the first few seconds. In the first few seconds of the song, do you remember what happened? There's our first unusual thing and our first possibly mistake in this mix. Listen to the opening here.
It might seem crazy what I'm.
It's basically a CD skipping effect. There is basically in here a bad edit. You could call this a bad edit. For anyone who knows editing, at the end of this looped introductory chord, there's a clip where it hasn't been cut on a zero crossing, it hasn't been cross-faded, it just clicks, and that's it. Let me know what you guys think about audio levels, if you need me to turn up or down me or the music. But for anyone who knows editing, you know that this is not how you're supposed to edit something, but it gives a CD skipping effect, which is interesting. The song was released in 2014. There's probably a lot of young people who are listening to this song who probably never owned a CD and never heard one skip, yet the effect is on there. Why is it there, and what is it doing for the song? Well, first of all, there's this aspect of creating rhythmic interest. There's this pattern interrupt. And as much as possible, when you can do pattern interrupts to people, where you give something slightly different than what they expect, where there's some kind of surprise in the beginning of a track, you're much more likely to keep their attention. Even if it's with something that's grating or annoying or off or unusual, just the fact that something is happening in your first couple of bars that are somewhat unexpected. And right here, the way the song starts is somewhat unexpected. But it does another thing. This song, although it's really well rhythmically locked and has great groove, is a kind of organic feeling groove. And starting off with this almost robotic, error-sounding intro just makes the rest of the groove that comes after it feel even more organic relative to this overly quantized intro. Now, are the producers of this track thinking about it in as intellectual of a way as I'm describing right now? Not necessarily. And you don't have to. You just have to know that, thing feels better when we do weird intro. But when you're having trouble making intros that grab people, spending some time in your life to actually analyze music in this way is extremely useful. So this is a type of listening I want you to be able to do, even though you shouldn't be doing it all the time. So one of the things that's happening on this track is that everything is really on grid very well. There's probably a lot of looping going on in this track, and it could potentially sound a little bit mechanical, but giving us something in the beginning that sounds extra mechanical makes the rest of the rhythm that comes after it feel, relatively speaking, even more organic still. Now, the big thing that I notice about this track, for me, and the way that I'm hearing it, in the verse, in these particular headphones and in other headphones I've tried and on my speakers, is that for me and my ears, an unusual thing is happening here. Where for me, the loudest, or at least the most accented percussion element is not the kick, is not the snare drum, but is the hi-hat. Don't get me wrong, you can hear the kick loudly and clearly in this opening verse section. You can hear the backbeat of 2 and 4 of that snare drum. But for me, I can hear that hi-hat even more so. It just feels accented. And we're giving this accent on the 3 of the beat, which is an unusual place to accent. Most records, if you're in a EDM style production, the emphasis might be on the downbeat. It's on the kick drum. If you're on a much more pop style of production, the emphasis might be on 2 and 4. Here in this dance track, and in a lot of dance tracks that really force people to move, there's often a unusual part of the beat that's emphasized. And for me here, it's the 3. Now, it actually depends what headphones you're listening on, what speakers you're listening on, and which of your ears hears better than the other. Because what's going on here is the hi-hat and the snare drum are actually slightly panned out to the sides, not 100%, just a little bit panned out to give it some bit of width. And I've found that if I actually reverse left and right, for me on this mix, the relationship between the hi-hat and the snare drum changes. So maybe this is different for you than for me. Let's listen to this. And as we're going along here, I'll take my face off of the screen so as not to distract you, but I'm going to hit a couple of buttons here in Pro Tools on this Isotope Ozone plugin. This one here will take the mix from stereo down to mono. Blue with this one circle will be mono, and this will be stereo. And these arrows here will flip the left and right side. And tell me how you're hearing it. First, I'll play it once the way it was done. And for me, the hi-hat is being accented. But because my ears hear slightly differently from left to right, and I can almost guarantee yours do too, that relationship changes. And as soon as I flip the left and right, the snare drum starts to be more accented. So we'll also listen to this in mono to hear, depending if you have asymmetric hearing one way or another, when we listen to this in mono, I think you'll agree that on average, for the average listener, the three, that hi-hat, is being emphasized more than on the average pop track. Here it is, first, the original way.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break.
Now, did that change for you? That changed for me. And this is one of the big things I want to clue you into again for listening. Once you start to really analyze what's going on in songs and mixes, you will start to understand ways in which your listening system is flawed, including you, because you're part of your listening system. For me, when I did this switch, I hear more snare drum as soon as I flip the mix. Did it change for you? Let's listen to it one more time. I'll skip this little tiny bit here.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go.
So even if you start to hear more snare, you hear more snare than I do, I still think relative to the average pop song, this emphasis of the three, of the hi-hat, this making the hi-hat too loud in a place where it's appropriate to make the hi-hat too loud, is one of the parts that gives the verse a unique groove, and part of what makes the chorus drop so hard, and what makes the chorus work so well. We'll look at that in just a second. But let's listen to this section one more time, this time in mono. Here we go, I'll do stereo and then mono.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
So I hope you agree with me there. That's one thing that's happening here, is this accent of the hi-hat, making it a little bit louder than you'd expect, which made one of my engineer friends think the hi-hat was grating and too loud and annoying and getting in the way of the snare and the kick drum sounding really big. So here's another interesting thing that I just want to talk about in this verse section before the chorus drops, is just how the kick drum and the bass sit in this opening chorus. This is the loudest and biggest that you're going to hear the kick drum in the entire song. Later in the chorus section, this kick drum is going to be, in my opinion, buried under the bass. But here, you can hear the kick drum really loudly and clearly, even though it's a kind of muffled, tubby, woofy, indistinct sounding kick drum, because there is no bass pattern playing along with it. There is a bass that does occur in this opening section, but it's doing a call and response thing. So one of the things I always want you to have you listen for when you're analyzing a mix or analyzing your own mix to see if a decision is right, is to just put things in rank order of what are the loudest things in this section. When you're listening to another mix, trying to figure out what makes it tick, just ask yourself, what are the priority A instruments? What are the one or two instruments that are our tier A instruments in this section? What are our one or two elements that are our tier B instruments? And what's the everything else? So for me, the hi-hat, and it depends on what kind of system you're listening on, it could be the kick drum, are the dominant elements, or maybe for you it's the hi-hat and the snare, and behind that is maybe the vocal. But then the tertiary elements are these everything else elements, include the bass line that comes in doing a response to the vocal. There's an organ part that comes in playing a melody, playing an essential counter melody to the vocal that's kind of buried in the mix. Now, a lot of mixers, if we were to approach this, we'd say, oh man, there's a lead organ that comes in here that doesn't sound like a lead part. It sounds like it's doing a duet with the vocal. It's supposed to be doing a duet with the vocal, but it's not loud enough. We need to jack that thing up. So now I want you to listen to this section, listening to the rhythm section and the vocal, which are the tier A stuff here, and listen to that separately, the drums and vocal being our main stuff, and then our bass and our organ that comes in. And just listen to how they're prioritized in this section, and how they're de-emphasized relative to just keeping the groove going. Because the goal here isn't to get you distracted by the ear candy, isn't to get you enveloped in the counter melodies. It's to say, we need to get this person out of their chair right now and their butt shaking on the dance floor. So let's listen to how that's handled.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
Do you hear how quiet this counter melody is compared to the lead?
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space.
The bass is the loudest one.
Like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because
So listen to that. We've had 3 repeats here. And in the first 20 seconds of this song, look at all of the effort they're putting in to keep our attention going. We have big kick drum, oddly accented hi-hat. We have main vocal part. And the mix is so sparse that the kick drum and the vocal can sound really big. And those are things that people latch onto for sense of what the song is all about. And if you have a great sounding vocal and you have a great sounding kick and hi-hat, like, you kind of have people. But what can we do to keep their attention? Well, we got vocal call, and then we've got response on one instrument with one tone. And that is kind of buried to not keep us from staying interested in the rhythm section. Then we have the vocal call again, and then we have a response again with a different tone, a different texture. And then we have the vocal call, and then we have the response again, this time with the bass line. This is the first time we hear the bass drop in the song. And it's a different tone, a different texture. There have been 3 different tones or textures added in response to the vocal here in the first 15 to 20 seconds. And then after those 3 responses, we get hit with the background vocals. And all of a sudden, the mix starts to widen up. And all of a sudden, there's this high frequency content. There's this width. There's this extra texture. So in the first 20 seconds, we've been hooked with weird sounding introduction, interesting groove with unusual accent, strong vocal performance with an interesting tone, and it can have an interesting tone because there's a lot of space. All that's happening right now is drum set and vocal, and all the other instruments that come in, an organ part, and then a bass part, they're not happening consistently. We have the call of the vocal and the drums, and then the response of these additional textures. And then the background vocals hit. So all of those changes happen just in the first 20 to 25 seconds. Part of this is arrangement, and that's what makes a mix great, is arrangement. But part of it is Leslie Brathwaite here going like, all right, what just makes the song feel good? And he's probably doing it in a way where he's not analyzing in the same way we are, and we shouldn't necessarily be so intellectual and analyzing when we're doing our own mixes, but going through the exercise of doing this kind of thing so that when you are sitting down, you're not being intellectual then, can be extremely useful. It really programs you to think in a different way or to listen in a different way, to occasionally do exercises like this. So let's hear the intro one more time. And now we're going to play all the way through, listen for all these things I've talked about. And when the chorus drops, there's a huge change here. What makes the chorus be able to get so much bigger is for this whole intro, our first 20 to 25 seconds, the bass has not dropped as a consistent element throughout the song. But all of a sudden, when our chorus hits, we're going to have a whole new register of low end. Now a consistent bass part is finally going to come in. That's not just a response to the vocal. And on top of that, we're going to add a new percussion element that totally changes the feel of the mix. Where before we had the 3 kind of accented and this weird lifting feeling of the 3 being accented that makes us like lift our shoulders, all of a sudden some claps are going to come in. And those claps are going to be so dominant that all of a sudden our focus on the rhythm is going to change from being on the 3 to being on the 2 and 4 when we hit the chorus. Another thing that's going to happen in the chorus that makes the mix sound incredibly wide, at risk of burying the vocal, and we'll talk about that too. But for right now, listen to the things we've talked about in the verse, and then when we get to the chorus, listen for that new register to come in the low end, and listen for the accent of the beat to change from 3 being significantly emphasized to 3 still being there, but now 2 and 4 really dominating it. Here we go, first in stereo.
it might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
So, hopefully you've heard some of this stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't keep my face up on the screen for I was giving these extremely long-winded, detailed explanations of things, but hopefully it was useful to hear anyway. Man, just that shift from 3 being accented and 2 and 4 being slightly de-emphasized to now 2 and 4 being the biggest thing on earth, it just all of a sudden almost like makes you bang your head and just revives your ability to get into the groove of this song in a way that kind of forces you to dance. I mean, let's listen to this transition one more time. It's just so fantastic. Even if you think that 2 and 4 were the most emphasized thing because you're hearing it on different speakers or you have slightly different ears than I do, you can just hear how much more 2 and 4 starts to dominate when this chorus drops. As well as the kick drum, if you really listen closely, the kick drum starts to disappear when we get into the chorus. It's just now a pulse. It's not really audible because the bass now is allowed to dominate the kick drum a little bit. And that's okay because the bass in this section is doing something more interesting than the kick drum. Let's listen for those things in this transition one more time, and then we'll talk about what's happening in the vocals because that's super interesting here too.
With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
So interesting thing here. There's a lead vocal in the song, but is the lead vocal the tier A most important element in this section? I'm going to argue no. For me, to my ears, the way that I hear things on these particular headphones I'm listening on right now, the tier A instruments in this chorus appear to be the background vocals and the snare drum. This is especially true if you're listening on headphones or a good speaker system. We'll actually hear that this relationship is going to change if we listen to this in mono. So if you're listening to this on a phone, just off of a phone speaker, you might have a different relationship with how the mix is than we're hearing it right now. If you're on good headphones or good speakers that are, appropriately placed. And I'll play this thing in mono so you can hear how much it changes in mono. But if you're listening on a good system, that's what's happening on a good system. We have new lower octave that's been introduced. The bass line is playing a more important line than the kick drum, so it's allowed to dominate the kick drum. But the bass is not as important as the vocal or as the 2 and 4 or as the background vocals. So it's a secondary element that are behind all those more primary elements. And on a good system, when this chorus drops, the most important thing are not the lead vocal. It's that 2 and 4 are happening and we're supposed to be moving and new interesting texture has occurred telling us that we are happy. I mean, if he had emphasized things differently, if Leslie had buried those hard-panned, super loud background vocals so that the lead could be louder, we don't have that same vibe of, yo, we're happy. That's what this song's about. If he had kept the 3 dominant here, instead of really forcing this 2 and 4 and really bringing up the level of those claps in the mix and allowing them to ride on top of things, we wouldn't have this discrepancy between the verse and the chorus. Let's listen to that change one more time. Listen for those things and how they're different before and after.
With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
Beautiful. And listen now, instead of listening for the things that we've just talked about, listen for the things that aren't emphasized. Listen for the kick and the bass. Depends on what kind of system you're on. It depends on the bias of your headphones, your room, or all that stuff. But I think on the average system, what's happening is that if you want to listen for the bass, it's there. But if you're not listening for it, it's allowed to disappear. The kick drum is allowed to be masked. If you really want to listen for the kick drum, you can hear it. But Leslie didn't go in here and say, I need to make this kick drum extra clicky. We're not hearing enough of the attack of the kick drum. Once everything drops in the chorus, we lose our kick drum. Let's go in and make sure that we boost a bunch of 2 to 5K on the kick drum and suck out some low mids. It does sound kind of tubby and not very modern. Let's really hear the impact and click on that kick drum. And you know what? Let's put a whole bunch of 40 hertz on that kick drum so it's big when this chorus section. No, none of that's happening. It's like, bass is more interesting than the kick. The bass is allowed to walk over for the kick because that's what's better for the song. Thank you, Leslie. So listen again to this section, listening for the kick and the bass and how well you can hear them and whether or not you can hear them.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know.
Like, I get this sense of what the kick drum is doing rhythmically. I feel what the kick drum is doing rhythmically without hearing it overly so with my ears. And the same thing with the bass. I get the sense for the melody and the harmony and the rhythm that's happening here without being overly conscious of it, without it poking its head out too much. And if I'm just listening to the song in a mode where I'm dancing, I'm not analyzing it, those things are physically moving me without me being conscious of what they're doing. And what Leslie is doing in this mix is saying, hey, be conscious of this. Be conscious of because I'm happy, and be conscious of 2 and 4. Oh yeah, and there's also a lead vocal here, and if you care about what he's saying, here's what he's doing, and he is, guiding you through the whole song. This other stuff, it's just going to impact you physically and emotionally without you even listening for it. Now, one of the beautiful things that I think works with this mix is that Leslie hasn't gone so far in making the kick and bass tubby and inarticulate that this only happens on a big system. And you'll hear that if I actually take out everything below 100 hertz, I'm going to roll off below 100 hertz by 6 dB. And you're going to hear that you still get the same feeling from the kick and bass. And depending on your system, you actually might even hear the kick and bass slightly better once we take out a bunch of this 100 hertz. But even with 100 hertz gone, because he's making them speak in the mid-range, and in this case, it's more low mids and center mids, and probably more low mids, where the kick and bass are really living, that just listen to the kick and bass before and after taking down this 100 hertz, and you're not going to lose them. Here we go.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
That's what you need to have happen in all your mixes. And I really recommend that you do this kind of filter. I just have 100 hertz here, taking it down by 6 dB. There's just a really wide Q here. And what this is doing is it is proving that on the cell phone, on the worst earbuds, on the laptop speakers, on the worst sound system, on a little, one speaker radio on the bus, that you can hear what's happening in the kick and bass. If you really want to listen for them, you can hear what's happening. And if you're not listening for them, you can feel what they're doing and what they're contributing rhythmically to the track. And this is on a kick and bass where we're not even adding a whole bunch of 2K and 4K and 5K on the kick, or a whole bunch of 1K and 2K on the bass. And in general, in a lot of conventional mixes, if you want to get your kick or your bass audible, those are places to look at boosting, right? 2K to 5K, conventional place to boost kick drum to some degree in most genres. Maybe a little less in hip hop. Bass, to make it stick out, somewhere between 800 hertz and 1.5K, something like that. It's maybe slightly higher frequencies in some genres. But those aren't the frequencies that are really being boosted on this kick and bass. But they still work because they have enough going on in the lower mids, and there's so little competition in the low mids that you can have these tubby bass sounds that totally work and are audible and are heard, because the background vocals have almost no low mids in them. They're super up there in airy. They're what's contributing all this 6, 7, 8 to 10K information. And when you listen to this track in stereo, these background vocals are louder than the lead. But something really interesting happens when we switch this track out to mono, which I'm going to do now. Just by clicking this button, we'll take it from stereo to mono. And when it's in mono, you're going to hear that the lead vocal becomes the most central element. It's wild. Here's our before.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
So this is one of the next lessons we can learn from this. You could argue that Leslie is making a mistake here in the mix. He's made a mistake with his panning because, in this early verse section where the hi-hat and the snare are slightly panned, you can have a totally different perception of the mix based on the asymmetries in your hearing, depending on whether you're listening to it this way or this way, left to right or right to left. So that's one, possibly you could say that's a mistake. They should both be down the center. So you always know how that snare drum and that hi-hat are going to sound everywhere. But the fact is, he did 80 to 90% of the stuff here well enough that you can make quote unquote mistakes like that. And it really doesn't matter. Like there's more than one way this mix can work. And apparently this mix also does work when we put it into mono and the background vocals practically disappear. And what we're left with is basically the kick and bass groove, the 2 and 4 of the clap, less emphasized than before, and a lead vocal. And here's the thing, it is enough on a track to have a really good kick and bass groove, a 2 and 4 that's emphasized enough, you get the right balance between emphasis of the kick versus the snare, and you have a compelling lead vocal performance and great rhythms. And listening to this thing in mono, it's all good enough. But what makes it work as a mix, what makes it work as a production, and what makes this song really interesting is that there are these little tiny Easter eggs throughout the production that just give it forward momentum that we start to lose when the track goes into mono. But the mix still works in mono. It just works in a totally different way. Let's hear this section again in mono and in stereo and hear how much different it sounds, but how it works both ways. Here's our chorus in stereo.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
And listen to this chorus, even with 100 hertz rolled off and in mono, we still have the right elements in the mix being important. Let's check that one more time.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
It's about to get better.
Clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
Oops. Oh, I could have made that more dramatic. The bypass tool didn't work how I expected to. Let's try that one more time.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy.
Great. So I think you get the idea here. Now, we've heard this verse and chorus enough times where we're going to start getting bored of analyzing it together, which is why there's a bridge. Now, what happens in the bridge is interesting. This is another place where the kick drum becomes dominant again. We've discovered that in the verses, the kick drum is allowed to be dominant and the bass is allowed to be secondary. And one of the reasons the kick gets to be so big in the verse is that the bass is barely there and it's just occasionally playing response to the lead vocal. A similar thing is going to happen in the bridge, but the kick tone is going to completely change to a kind of kick tone that would only work in a bridge. Listen for the change from the chorus to the bridge and pay close attention to what I'm talking about how the kick tone changes from the rest of the song. Here we go.
That's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down. Can't none bring me down.
So what's different there? We've introduced a drum tone that's nowhere else in the rest of the song. And you can feel as this bridge goes on, the tension starts building more and more and more and more. And it gets more intense and it reaches maximum tension at the end of the bridge. And then we blow back out into chorus. So again, great arrangement choices that make a mix work. Some of the arcs that we're talking about, some of the good mix choices are just baked into the arrangement. But let's hear what's going on in this bridge one more time. The two biggest changes for me when we go from the chorus to the bridge is, once again, what part of the rhythm is being emphasized when we get into the chorus. Because this is not like harmonically dense material. This is not written like a Beatles song, right? With a Beatles song, you could play the thing on an acoustic guitar and voice, and it's written where the melody and the harmonic changes going into the bridge carries it, and it almost doesn't matter what the mix is. The song kind of works regardless of what's happening in the mix. This is a different style of music that is, to at least some degree, significantly production driven. And the changes in what part of the beat are being emphasized, the changes in the instrumentation, those things are more important than the harmonic songwriting changes in this kind of mix. Now, if you have a song where you do the both together, where you make amazing mix and arrangement decisions and amazing songwriting decisions, and, harmonic texture and, having the narrative of the song change through writing, then you have like Bohemian Rhapsody, right? But to evaluate just like what can make a mix work, even if the mix doesn't sound hi-fi, this kind of rhythmic material, the stuff that gets people out of their seats and dancing, where the mixer did not get in the way of making sure that the most central parts rhythmically are being emphasized, I think these are the tracks you can learn the most about mixing from, because getting the mix right or wrong on these is so important to whether or not people actually move. All right, let's listen to this transition one more time. The biggest thing that's changing here is we have a totally new rhythmic pattern in the low end, and we have a totally new rhythmic pattern out of the claps. And those are probably the most important elements in this section, is that we understand that there's a total different change in the way that we're supposed to move our bodies. And to help emphasize that, there's a new kick drum sound that has this weird resonance at 70 hertz. And we're using a kick drum sound, a kick drum sample, that would be totally unsuited to be in an entire song. And I've heard many new mixers make the mistake of using a kick drum sound like this and having it be their kick drum sound for the entire song. This is not the kind of kick drum sound you could get away with in the verse or the chorus. It would be distracting in the verse or the chorus. It would be too bulbous. It would get in the way of things, but we have this interesting, intricate pattern being played on a resonant kick drum sound that you couldn't use in any other section of the song. And we've switched to this clapping feel. It's a syncopated clapping feel, but it makes me feel eighth notes. We've gone from feeling the 3 to feeling the 2 and 4 to now this syncopation that are all around the idea of giving me this this sense of an additional subdivision. So let's hear this transition from chorus to bridge.
If you feel like that's what you want to do, hey, go, bring me down, can't none bring me down, your love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down, I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down, your love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down, I said, clap along if you feel like a room without.
Yeah, just really interesting pattern shift again. And we're only 1 minute and 30 seconds into the song. And what has happened here structurally is that we had all these weird pattern interrupts in the beginning, a whole new chorus where the texture and the rhythmic emphasis completely changes. We're back to something we already knew, the verse. And of course, there's development happening in that verse that we haven't even listened to, that we could explore. And then 1.5 minutes in, the whole entire song changes to basically a different song. And now we have this resonant kick drum that's emphasizing, I would say it's emphasizing the 1, the 3, and the 4, and then the syncopated clap against it. So what's giving so much of this, its forward movement, is just how well this is arranged. And sometimes when you feel like your mixes aren't inspiring, it's because they're not doing this kind of thing. They're not doing what this song here is doing. always giving us a sense of there's change that's going to happen and there's more change that's going to come. And each change that's going to come, there's going to be some payoff associated with it. The way the background vocals start to be handled differently in the bridge. There's so much more I could talk about on this song. This is literally, how long is this? Let's see. We're 3 minutes and 45 seconds of a song, and we've gotten about 2 minutes into it. And I have talked on this song for about 40 minutes. I mean, that's how much is in there. I'd love to see really quick some of your comments to see if any of you have similar comments. I definitely want to read through these chats and comments. Here's another one that says, this person says, another important thing to note, this track is supposed to be somewhat of a callback to older Motown records, and those mixes often had weird bad mix decisions due to their fast work pace. Oh man, I'd love to analyze some old, I love Motown tracks. I'd love to analyze some old Motown tracks with you. This is way more hi-fi sounding than Motown records. It's way more precise and way more intricate in certain ways, but they do get the kinds of rhythmic feel. And that was the thing with Motown records. They had to be so sure that they were emphasizing the right things in the mix, because there's so many things happening in the average Motown record that you really can't hear because the technology wasn't there, the skill wasn't there, I'm sorry to say the skill wasn't there. It almost didn't need to be there because of how good the musicians were, but the norms weren't there to make so many things audible that it was super essential that you get the right things emphasized in a Motown mix. Fernando says, clap along. Yeah, I mean, this is a song that invites people to engage with the song, to participate in the song. And the claps are something that does that. But the idea of changing which part of the beat that is emphasized in a refreshing way that keeps you dancing. This is so much different than like a 1970s krautrock band like Neu, where it's like, we're going to establish one rhythm and play it for 11 minutes, where people just trance out to it. Those songs don't call people to the dance floor the same way that something like this does. And every time a section changes over, like there's just a refreshment that happens. Vernon Elliott says, way less transient on the kick in the chorus. Yes, Justin. Yeah, it's not necessarily that, I don't know if Leslie is actually mixing the kick differently in the chorus than in the verse. I think he's just allowing it to be covered. I can't tell for sure with all the limiting that's happening on the master, but it could very well be that it's just the kick stays at a stable level and the bass is allowed to mask it. I mean, there's a chance he could be changing in the chorus. If you really wanted the kick to be heard in both the verse and the chorus, he would have to EQ the kick differently for the chorus than it is EQ'd for the verse for it to be even more audible in the chorus. But is that necessary? Would that be the responsible thing to do, to add a bunch of upper mid-range on this so that the kick drum pattern becomes really apparent instead of allowing the bass drum pattern to be the most apparent thing? Well, man, I could talk about this stuff so much longer. I feel like I could do an hour and a half just on this one song, but I'm going to try to cut it off here to keep from being too insanely long-winded about a 3.5 minute song. But hopefully you could hear some of these things. I really want to get your perspective. Did you hear anything differently than I heard? Were the things that I missed? One of the things I was hoping that we get a chance to talk about is how the background vocals are treated throughout the song, because they play an incredibly important role, not just in being a main textural and emotional driving force in the chorus, but in the development of the song as it goes along. Because once we get to the 2.5 minute mark in the song, there's not so many new things left to introduce, but the background vocals play that role of constantly introducing throughout the song new ideas, new emotion, new turns of phrase, new emphasis of which section of the beat. Just like, I wonder what's going to happen in the next. A lot of that happens with the background vocals and their treatment. But I hope this was useful for you. I hope it's encouraging you to just open up this track for yourself. Listen to it in mono. Listen to it flipped both ways. And listen to a few of your favorite tracks through this lens of, in any given section, what are the 1 or 2 tier A, priority number 1 instruments? What are the number 1 or 2 tier B or priority B instruments? And what are the everything else's? And how do they interact with one another? And then how does that change from section to section? Another great question to ask yourself on some of your favorite releases are just listen to the first 20 to 25 seconds. and see what they are doing to capture you. Sometimes an artist can capture you because they're your favorite artist and you love them, and even though the first 20 seconds is theoretically boring to someone who doesn't love that artist, you're captured anyway. That's why I want you to especially try this approach with songs from artists who you don't necessarily love, who you don't necessarily identify with. Like, I'm not a huge Pharrell Williams fan. I'm just someone who goes like, oh, there's something that works in this song. There's a reason it has billions of streams and why it's played at every wedding. Let's figure out what those reasons are. So it's even easier to do this kind of analysis on artists that you don't identify with, but that you respect or appreciate something about because chances are they're doing so many things right to cross that bridge for you, to cross that gap and grab you even though you're not a fan of their kind of music or you don't like that band usually. That's why there's so many lessons about mixing and arrangement to learn from the artists you like the least, who you begrudgingly love a song from. And that's why I think these kinds of wedding songs, the songs that are played at every wedding, are a great place. So think of your favorite wedding songs. What are the songs that you hate going to weddings, you don't really like to dance, but there's this one song that comes on and you're like, I got to get up and dance for that one. Or, ooh, I'm glad they're playing that one. Those are the songs to analyze, because I guarantee you'll find in the first 20 and 25 seconds of those songs the kinds of things that we're discovering in this track. Well, I hope this has been useful for you. If you want to go even deeper with me, we have a whole members only section where you can get mixed feedback on your own tracks with really specific advice about the lowest hanging fruit you could do to improve your own tracks. And sometimes it's things like, well, you got to amp up your kick drum and add more 2 and 5K to it. But sometimes for people who are good, it's like, I hear that you're getting good. You need to get a little bit worse and start thinking more like a fan and less like an audio engineer, which is what Leslie is doing so well here. He's getting fans, or not even fans, non-music fans, casual people to move their butts rather than trying to impress audio engineers. And he succeeded wildly, as did, of course, the producers and Pharrell and everyone. It's not just Leslie didn't make this whole song happen. He just didn't mess it up and enhance what should be enhanced. And also shout out, I think there's Ruben Cohen, who we've had on this channel recently, who mastered this one, done a bunch of great work. So shout out to Ruben Cohen as well over at Lurson Mastering with Gavin Lurson. Check out their masterclass on mastering right here on the SonicScoop channel. But consider becoming a member of this channel. There's a join button, or if you're an iOS app, go into the description and there's a place to join. Also, check out one of our great full-length courses. If you really want to mix better than you ever have in your entire life, go check out Mixing Breakthroughs. It really does change the game for people. I mean, you get such leapfrog moments out of that course. Check out mixingbreakthroughs.com. Or if you're really interested in getting a true handle on EQ or compression, check out EQ Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs. Also, check out Mastering Demystified. That one will teach you everything you need to know about mastering. Last but not least, shout out to some of our brand sponsors. Big thanks once again and always to Soundtoys. I'm actually wearing my Soundtoys hoodie today. Great quality hoodie, but more importantly, great quality plugins, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Also, big shout out and thanks to Lewitt Audio. I'm speaking into their 440 Pure Vita edition. This is, in the sub $300 range, $250-ish plus price range. And it is a remarkably good and well-built mic for this price point. This one in the Vita Green edition, part of the proceeds go to preserving rainforest land in Costa Rica. So that's something you're into. Check out the limited edition Vita Green color. I absolutely love the shock mounts on these microphones and the pop filters that magnetically attach to all of them. They make mics from around $100 up to many thousands of dollars, and they make terrific stuff. So check them out at Lewitt Audio. Also, big shout out and thanks to Ultimate Support. Right now, I've got the deluxe broadcast boom stand on my desk, and I have Ultimate Support stands that I've had for 2 decades that are still working. So they really get the price to performance ratio right. So thanks to those guys over at Ultimate Support. Big thanks to you for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.